For Activity 7, interviewing considerations, I worked with both Miss James and Mr. Kantoritz, our assistant principal and principal. I created a document using the interview questions, and then we discussed these interview questions at a sit down in Mr. K's office. We talked about all of the questions. We talked about effective instruction, supporting a safe and effective school environment, resolving conflict between adults in your school, ensuring staff members continue to grow as professionals, how you work with the SIT team to realize and make change. And we did talk about what books I have read recently, mistakes I've made, and the last one being if your life was a movie, who would play the lead role? After kind of discussing all these questions with Miss James and Mr. K, we kind of focused in on a couple. One, ironically enough, being the last book that you read. I talked to them about the last book I read was No Easy Day, and it was about the infiltration of Osama bin Laden's complex, and how the U.S. Army was able to find him and track him down. And I asked them why we would talk about books that we read recently, and they said often the last book you read will lead to a 2 or 3 prong question. So Ms. James said, when you answer a question, it's okay to take notes as you go so you don't get lost in conversation. One of the biggest things that I've learned about myself is throughout the last year and talking to different principals and people from human resources and all these people I meet is that sometimes I absolutely do kind of go off topic. And so after discussing what book I read last and why that was my favorite book or things like that, Ms. James said oftentimes these interview panels will have up to 10 people at them. And there is a bit of a intimidating factor upon that because you're at the central office with everybody and anybody, right? It can be from the superintendent to classroom teachers and things like that. And so an effective way to stay on task is to make a note of the question, and if you get another part of the question, make a note about that question and keep consistently reviewing that to make sure you're staying on task. So I thought that was kind of funny because I had a realization that sometimes I will start talking and conversations kind of have a natural way to go, but sometimes my conversations go off topic. So that was a really interesting part because I didn't think that question would be very relevant, but it ended up showing me the most information I needed. The other question that was one of our biggest ones is how to resolve conflicts between 2 upset adults at school. Over the last year, I have been fortunate enough to be in different conversations with various staff members with Mr. K and Ms. James. They've allowed me to sit in on personnel matters, and obviously there's confidentiality that comes along with that. But I've learned that personality differences between staff members, not even on the same team sometimes, but those personality differences can absolutely impact your school in a negative way. So trying to have that kind of micro political role of looking ahead, trying to see if something's going to happen before it happens, kind of paying attention to people's kind of attitude, the vibe they have about themselves, how they carry themselves, and try to address those situations before there is a issue between 2 employees or more. So what I've learned with that is by keeping employees happy, keeping people content, keeping people focused on task, and understanding that you're there to do a job for children, and a lot of the other stuff that kind of comes along with that needs to be left outside the classroom. And those conversations can be had with the administration in the office. So I've learned that really to look ahead, try to solve these problems before they happen. Naturally, you're going to have some differences with people, and then when those differences happen, hopefully they're professional enough to bring those considerations to yourself as an administrator, and then you can bring them in, talk to them separately, or sit down and have a discussion as a team, because usually it is people on the same team where they have differences. Last week, I was able to spend an entire day attending PLCs for all the grade levels, kindergarten through 5th, and I noticed that it's pretty quick to pick up on if there is a dynamic that is good for the team or if there's a dynamic that's not good for the team. It was very easy to see how teams mesh and work together, who talked, who didn't talk, who was positive, who was negative, who is happy teaching, who maybe isn't happy teaching. And so watching that kind of play out really goes along with how to resolve conflict between two people at your school, because I got to see some conflict kind of naturally come up. Nothing big, just differences of opinion on curriculum or where they should be at this time of the year, or who's helping make what's happening with that stuff. So I really think that if you can keep those conflicts to a minimum, you can definitely help your school be successful. And as an administrator, keeping your school successful and keeping your employees happy just helps the kids overall. So really the conversation that we had about the interview process is that the questions can vary. Obviously, they're going to focus mostly on the professional standards of an administrator, but that oftentimes those questions will have 2-3 prongs to them. And to make sure I'm taking notes, staying on task, and making sure that I'm answering the questions being asked, not going somewhere else with them. So overall, it was a really good process, and I really appreciated their time and patience through that process.